Hello everyone, Jeff here with an update on Antilia's development. This is version 0.11.0, and lately I've been working on pathfinding and AI behaviors, as well as adding some new regions to the Isle of Kasau. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that, and then we'll discuss what's coming next for Antilia, which I'm planning to be the multiplayer features. So stick around for that update as well. So let's go ahead and get started. The focus of the first quarter in 2022 was on implementing a proper pathfinding solution for Antilia. Back when Antilia was an MMORPG, I never had a good solution in place for pathfinding. Creatures would either move just directly in a straight line from point to point, or in the case of some characters, they would use a series of waypoints. I'll spare you all the technical details, but suffice to say, implementing a pathfinding solution for Antilia that was robust enough and yet also dealt with the large open world paged in and out required quite a bit of development effort to get working. But in the end, the solution I ended up with works pretty well. It's fast, it minimizes the load on the server, and it's quite robust. Paths from one side of the Isle of Kasau to the other side can be calculated in less than 1/100th of a second, and pathfinding doesn't require the full terrain to be loaded on the server or the client. Now, you may still notice in some of these shots that the characters will at times still clip through an item or they'll walk over them, particularly at the beginning or the end of their path. I'm still working on how to determine best which side of an object that a character should approach. That's not obvious when you're calculating from the other side of the map where you'll kind of end up in the end. Of course, to get this all working, the scene editor had to be expanded with some new tools. These help generate and edit the pathfinding data, and so far that's been working really well. There are still a few things that will need more attention in the future, especially generating pathfinding data for the interior of buildings and around the exterior, but I'll address that in a future update. For now, I'm really happy to see the characters and creatures moving around in Antilia, not just along predefined paths, but finally they can find their way from wherever they are to wherever I want them to be, while mostly choosing a sensible path along roads and bridges. Granted, they are occasionally still a little bit derpy. With the solution for pathfinding in place, in the second quarter I started work on the NPC AI behaviors. Now, similar to pathfinding, there were no sophisticated AI behaviors in the Antilia MMORPG. There were creatures like the Ishi and the Ishi King, but those behaviors were very primitive. Basically just choose a target, move towards it, and then attack repeatedly. This new system implements a behavior tree, which basically means that I have these core behavioral nodes and then slots that those nodes can be populated with. Now, at this point in the video, I had planned to walk you through a sample of how the phishing behavior works and how the different fallbacks work, but let's save that for another time because that got rather complicated. I'm working on an in-game interface that might help to illustrate this in the future, and I may even allow players to set up their own behavior trees. I have to be a little bit careful that we don't set it up so that players can create scenarios where the server becomes unresponsive or characters get stuck in an endless loop or anything like that, so we'll try it and see. For now, I've been able to easily set up some pretty interesting behaviors with this system. These characters here by the dock catch fish and place them into a crate. Meanwhile, another set of characters is working out here by the logging camp. They continually fell trees and gather up the wood and firewood that drops and place that into another crate. Then there's a sort of mule character that runs between those two groups and brings the raw fish and firewood back to the old Taipii base camp, where another character tends a fire pit and grills up all the raw fish. The cooked fish is then distributed to food crates so everyone fishing and felling trees has abundant energy. I think it's pretty neat to see the Taipii start to behave like a small functioning community like that. And of course, I have a lot more behaviors I have planned that I'll slowly continue to implement and add over time. Group behaviors, a work for guild behavior, traveling merchant behaviors. All of that should make the Taipii much more interesting and fun to interact with as it continues to grow over time. Now, I'd love to discuss all of this more sometime, maybe in a tutorial video in the future when that interface is more complete. I have all sorts of interesting stuff that I could show about the schedule behavior, prioritized list, round robin behaviors, and also discussion about the AI architectural components, the AI behaviors, the tasks they create, and the task steps. but I think that's all getting a bit beyond the scope of this update video. Suffice to say, a lot of thought and development went into this to give Antilia's NPCs a lot of potential for the future, and I feel I've built a pretty good foundation that's easy to expand. Next, let's take a look at some of the regions on the Isle of Kasau that I've been working on in the World Editor. You've no doubt noticed this first new region appearing in this video a few times already, the Burning Sands. This is an arid region on the path between Malé Beach and the Bamboo Gardens. The sands will provide a variety of plants and mushrooms to forage from, and are home to peaceful sand jadao. There will be some hazards here though, cacti, worms that attack from underground, and these flying creatures called rasha, which attack from above. I plan to add a road through here that will be loosely patrolled, as well as a bridge crossing the stream. Another interesting area nearby is this decay pit, located up a narrow winding mountain path. Like the Tangled Lands and the Moran Fountain, this area is magically active, but with magic that's on the decay side of the Moran spectrum instead of the renewal side. When we're ready to add combat, I'm thinking about adding a creature that lives here, something unpleasant that'll provide an extra challenge. Next, in the Tangled Lands, there's an island that wasn't being used very well, so I gave it a bit of a makeover and I've been thinking about how to use it. It's now called the Isle of Mist. Immediately to the south of this area, I plan to add a ruin that'll be of some significance and interest to the Taipii mages, so I've set this area up with a few buildings that will serve as a camp for them. This area is still a work in progress, and I plan to add a lit path leading from the Bamboo Gardens to this mage camp. As this path passes through the Tangled Lands, there will be some low-level enemies that will attack the player when they pass through here, especially at night. The mages I plan to add here in the future will provide leads on some important mysteries on the Isle of Kasau, and no doubt provide quests for the more adventurous characters. A less dramatic, but also new area are these bamboo pools, which lay just west of the logging camp. This area was added to provide a source of bamboo outside of the Bamboo Gardens and the Jadao Grazelands. It seemed a bit obnoxious to have characters felling bamboo right next to all the buildings and these other significant places. There are grassland jadao nesting here, and I plan to add a few more passes in the future where I'll add some more plants and mushrooms to this area. So that's it for the new areas. The Isle of Kasau is starting to fill in, and I'm aiming to have all the major regions roughed in before the end of the year. So let's talk about what's next for Antilia's development. My biggest goal right now is to get Antilia back in position so that we can be running multiplayer alpha tests again around the end of the year. Now initially these tests will be invite only, they'll be very limited in scope, we'll be systematically testing core gameplay systems like menus and joining multiplayer games. They're not going to be about having fun. But these will be a very important first step toward getting Antilia back into that alpha testing like we had with the MMO. So in order to reach that goal, I've decided to prioritize the needed improvements to the game's networking system, caching, and the implementation of missing multiplayer features to enter into development later this month. While I still believe Antilia needs more core gameplay systems in place, like NPC shops, before it really offers something like a full gameplay loop, I don't want to keep putting off the multiplayer tasks forever and end up missing this year's goal. So with this next version, version 0.12, I'm going to be working on networking and multiplayer with the aim of having that done around the end of the third quarter. Once multiplayer is working, I'll immediately begin testing that with some of those closest to the project. Then after a few rounds of testing and improvement, we'll continue on with building version 0.13. With that version 0.13 release, I want to add in a few more features like NPC shops and conversations that complete at least a basic gameplay loop for Antilia. It won't be much at first, mostly just harvesting resources and fishing, selling those items, and then spending that income on better gear or items that can only be bought in the NPC shops. I expect the next big development task next year to be about crafting, creating equipment, including some new outfits for the Taipii, combat, and maybe we might get to the magic systems. If we don't get to magic, hopefully at least we can have a few special online events where the community can get together again and we can hang out around the campfire. Fingers crossed. Well, that's going to do it for this update. I hope you found that interesting. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section down below. Until next time, thanks for watching. A special thanks goes to our Patreon supporters. If you'd like to support the project, you can do so by visiting www.patreon.com/Antilia.